Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track here, Wednesday now, the 6th of November, 2024. Glad you tuned in to today's update. Everybody made it through last night. Everybody okay? We're all good? It's time to talk weather. The weather does not give a hoot about what's going on in our sad little world, right? No, it does not. And to that end, we have Major Hurricane Rafael now. It made it to Category 3 intensity, getting ready to cross over Cuba, and then it's going to get into the Gulf of Mexico. Part of this very, very busy back part of the hurricane season that we have had, and we're going to look at that and more in today's update. All right, and I'm feeling better. I have felt better. It's just all that post-cold stuff. Finally, probably 96% back to normal. Anyway, let me prove it to you. So the first up here is this post from our friend at Fox Weather, Steve Bender. Yeah, we have our 5th major hurricane, and that is important. That's the 5th one this year, and the 4th to form since September 26. Of course, we're talking about Rafael here, and another stat, or a set of stats for you from Dr. Klotzbach. Again, Rafael is the 4th major hurricane in the Atlantic to form since the 26th of September. Of course, the others were Helene, Kirk, and Milton. And this year is tied with 2020 for the most Atlantic major hurricane formations between that time period on record. Very important there, on record. We know there could have been stuff prior to 1851 or prior to the satellite era. You don't have to comment about it. Save your energy for other stuff. We know. But yeah, no other Atlantic season on record has had more than 2 major hurricane formations between September 26th and today. Pretty remarkable stuff. And even Dr. Klotzbach's prepared for all the, oh, what about when there was dinosaurs? I mean, seriously, we know this. And so he does put this out there. While the Atlantic Hurricane Database does go back to 1851, we likely missed major hurricanes prior to the satellite era. Duh. Here's a nice paper discussing this potential. And you know what? It is interesting to read about it. I'll put a link to that paper in today's update. Then, I like this here from Fancy Spot. Don't know who that is, but it's true. I believe Oscar was also a major hurricane at some point, and we will have to wait until the winter probably when the National Hurricane Center specialists write up the TCR. You know what that stands for? Tropical Cyclone Report. It'll be interesting. I think Oscar was a major as well. All right, more data for you. The ACE score going up and up, and we're almost to the hyperactive phase. I'm going to message Dr. Klotzbach just to make sure I'm familiar with exactly what the metrics are for a, quote, hyperactive season. I want to make sure I have my facts straight, and then we'll talk about that more tomorrow because we're almost there. And with the exception of this dead period, roughly dead periods, that was dead there. There's a little bit of dead there. I mean, when you see it flat like that, there's no ACE, nothing. And then this period as a whole right in here was pretty innocuous overall. And then, of course, things just went nuts from late September until now. And we've added all these name storms, all that ACE energy up there, all these impacts, hundreds of people dead in the Western Atlantic Basin, as you well know, from mainly Helene, multiple hundreds of billions of dollars in damage when it's all said and done. So, yeah, we've had one heck of a hurricane season, as was predicted, but I want to make sure we get the numbers right because I know some people are keeping score, and it's important to, see where we literally landed when all is said and done. Even though we're not quite done, I will address this with Dr. Klotzbach to make sure I know what I'm talking about, and I'll bring it up again tomorrow. And it does matter. It's more than just proving people right or wrong. It's all about, making sure that we know what we're doing with some of this data, unlike some of the pollsters out there in politics world. I'm glad I'm in weather, that's for sure, as hard as this is. Anyway, this is what it looks like on the track map, and what an interesting couple of days it's been. You remember as well as I do that the GFS, which did great with the genesis of it, had it kind of milling around up here and then coming in somewhere along the central Gulf Coast. Nope, not going to happen. The GFS definitely whiffed on that. Now, that's several days out, obviously. When you get into the medium to long range, the forecast becomes less reliable. So it looks like now that old Rafael here will cross Cuba, get into the Gulf, and then eventually just kind of fizzle out over here as an abundance of dry air and even some wind shear will reduce it whittle it down like, a piece of wood that you just whittle, then there's nothing left. That's what will eventually happen with Rafael. Here's what it looks like on the satellite. Very well organized, small, compact system there. Went through parts of the Cayman Islands yesterday and last night, now impacting Cuba, and even parts of the Florida Keys is what it looks like on the close-up satellite. Losing some of its definition because it is starting to interact with land. So as you'd expect, you're going to drop some of that deep thunderstorm activity because of that interaction. But I want to pull up the Key West radar. We are having some issues down here, a few squalls moving through parts of the middle and lower Keys, certainly the lower Keys here, south and west of Marathon. But there's our hurricane, the radar beam coming out of Key West out here, pretty high in the atmosphere. Radar doesn't just come straight out. It's a beam, and it's up at a certain elevation, starting from the site, and then it can go several thousand feet as it spreads out, and then the whole thing turns. I'm trying to draw 3D here. And so you're looking far away, really high in the atmosphere once you get over here. And yet, look at that well-defined eye earlier, now starting to become less organized as it does interact with Cuba. But yes, Rafael made it to major hurricane status, and that's the 5th one of the season, as we talked about. Let's back up to this satellite view for a moment. The other disturbance that's out here that we need to watch, part of it impacting parts of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So let's slide that radar view over to the east just a little bit, and we will pull up the San Juan radar. And look at this, quite active over that region as well, with the showers and thunderstorms moving in, a few lightning strikes in there. Pretty wet overall, but boy, look over here near the Virgin Islands, just south and west of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. Quite a lot of rain, very heavy rain. Look at all those lightning strikes right there. Man, if you're in a boat out there, that'd be terrible, wouldn't it? But this just goes to show you that even these disturbances here can rotate in. Very heavy rain, squally conditions here over parts of the Virgin Islands. Yuck. If you went down there to get away from everything, well, it's pretty stormy, that is for sure. So what else? I already showed you this. Let's look at the models here. This is the GFS from the 12Z run today. Of course, there's Rafael, and there's your big old high pressure area. Look at that. There's Bermuda. It's like the Bermuda High, except look at the date, November 6th. What's going on? Very strange. This is a summer-like pattern. And listen, all honesty, if this, and this is very easy to figure out, if this said like September 6th, we would be very concerned about a hurricane that would just come barreling in around this high and probably making landfall somewhere in here like the GFS was showing. But the problem, at least mechanically speaking, just explaining that, from a mechanical point of view for this hurricane, because it is later in the season, that deep convection, it's like a very steep area of mass in the atmosphere. If it stayed intact, like you see here on this chart, all the way through, it would come right around that ridge and come into the central Gulf Coast. But because dry air especially, like I said, is going to really whittle it down. Look at all the moisture. The green is your deep moisture. And look how that whittles away after Cuba starts pulling in that dry air, and it just dries up and just doesn't do anything. And because of that, it becomes more shallow, and so it's not in that deep steering flow, which otherwise would have driven a deeper hurricane or a deeper cyclone. And when we say deeper, it extends higher up in the atmosphere. If this was September 6th or even October 6th for that matter, we'd be looking at a real big problem here, probably for southeast Louisiana, the Mississippi and Alabama Gulf Coast. But it's not those dates. It is, in fact, November the 6th. And so what's going to happen, it's going to dry out, lose all that deep convection, and then just kind of dissipate in the Gulf. Look at all that brown. Holy cow. Those are humidity values less than 50%, and some of those darker browns in here, you're talking 20 to 15, maybe even 10%. Wow. Very, very dry air, and those westerly winds coming across as well. Yeah, you can just forget it, which is a good thing. We've had enough. Thank you very much. Let's close up shop and call it a year. I wish it was that easy. And that brings me to this next part. We do have to watch and see what happens with that disturbance right there. That's the one that is bringing indirectly some inclement weather that I just showed you in the Virgin Islands. Over the next few days, it might try to develop some, even if it doesn't. All that tells me right there, rain, very heavy rain for Hispaniola, the southeast Bahamas, eastern Cuba. And then there's another disturbance. Look at that one right there. They're lined up. This literally looks like a September map. Yet, that date there is November 9th. Just a wacky, wacky weather year and everything else, right? Absolutely. So let's move this on out to a week and see what's happening on November the 13th. We might have to start watching the Southwest Caribbean again. Pattern generally stays favorable. Let's look at the upper levels. Show what I'm talking about. 200 millibars. Yep, still have that upper level high sitting right over the area. That favorable MJO just kind of stuck there, I guess. That's perfect breeding ground for something to try to get going. So, we may end up with the S or the T storm. What do we got? Sarah and Tony coming up, if memory serves. We'll see. And that could have impacts, of course, on the ACE score over here, which, like I said, I will address more tomorrow. Kind of start to put things in perspective and at least look ahead to the end of the hurricane season. Eventually, we will get there. All right, look, I made it through. Finally, the voice is coming back. Everything's better. Maybe it was all election anxiety, because no matter who you were rooting for, that was pretty crazy these last few months. That is for sure. But it is good to feel better. That is also for sure. Let's wrap it up. Get this online for you. From all of us at Hurricane Track, I, of course, am Mark Sudduth, and I do appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you some more tomorrow.